Mayday, mayday, mayday! Air Transat 236. The right engine has flamed out, and we're down to just a few hundred kilograms of fuel left.
It was the night of August 23, 2001. An Airbus A330 belonging to Air Transat lifted off from Toronto Pearson International Airport, bound for Lisbon, Portugal. On board were 293 passengers and 13 crew members, including 2 men whose names would soon be etched into aviation history. Captain Robert Piché, a 48-year-old veteran with 16,000 hours of flight time, and his young first officer, 28-year-old Dirk de Jager, with 5,000 hours under his belt, were in command. Their aircraft was nearly brand new, only 2 years old, state-of-the-art for its time. Nothing seemed unusual, nothing to suggest that this routine overnight journey across the Atlantic would become one of the most terrifying ordeals ever faced in commercial aviation. The aircraft climbed smoothly to 39,000 feet. It was midnight over the vast Atlantic, an endless darkness below, with no land in sight. Passengers settled in for the 7-hour trip. The cabin was calm. Most people had already drifted into sleep. For the pilots, these hours were usually uneventful. At cruising altitude, the autopilot handled most tasks. Their main job was to monitor instruments, communicate with air traffic control, and wait. 4 hours into the flight, deep in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the farthest point from land in either direction, something strange appeared on the cockpit display. The right engine showed abnormal oil readings: high pressure, low quantity, and low temperature. Oddly, the oil seemed too cold. That didn't make sense. Usually, engine oil heats up during operation. The pilots turned to the manuals, searching for answers, but found nothing. They radioed Air Transat maintenance in Canada. Even the ground crew had never seen such a combination of warnings. For the moment, they advised the pilots to monitor the readings. The plane itself was flying normally. Perhaps they thought it was just a faulty sensor. But half an hour later, a new warning appeared. This time, it wasn't oil, it was fuel. On an aircraft, fuel is stored in tanks inside the wings. Normally, both wings contain equal amounts, but Flight 236's right wing tank was draining faster than the left. The captain opened a valve to allow fuel to transfer from left to right, balancing the system. Soon, the warning disappeared. Problem solved, or so it seemed. Then, minutes later, another alarm. Low fuel. This was not a faulty gauge. The numbers were dropping. The right wing was losing fuel at an alarming rate. The captain realized the unimaginable. Somewhere, hidden in the night sky above the Atlantic, fuel was leaking away. At 39,000 feet, fuel is life. Without it, there's no engine, no thrust, no way to stay aloft. A sudden chill swept through the cockpit. The crew knew their options were limited. In the middle of the Atlantic, there is nowhere to land, except the Azores, a remote group of islands belonging to Portugal. The nearest airfield was on Terceira Island, still hundreds of kilometers away. They contacted air traffic control and declared an emergency, requesting immediate clearance to divert. But fuel was vanishing faster than calculations allowed. 1 ton gone every 5 minutes. At this pace, they wouldn't make it. Flight attendants searched the cabin windows for signs of a spray or vapor trail, anything to confirm a leak. But it was pitch black outside. Nothing could be seen. Then, the situation escalated. A fire warning flashed for the right engine. Within moments, it shut down. Passengers jolted awake to the sound of alarms and the sudden shift in the aircraft's rhythm. Fear spread like wildfire through the cabin. The steady hum of 2 engines was now reduced to the deep drone of 1. The plane descended as Captain Piché coaxed every ounce of power from the single remaining engine. But the fuel continued to drain. The left engine, now working at maximum thrust, struggled to carry the weight of the wide-body jet. Minutes later, the inevitable happened. It too failed. Silence. For the first time, an Airbus A330 carrying nearly 300 souls was gliding through the night, powerless, over the open ocean. Inside the cockpit, only emergency instruments glowed faintly. With the engines dead, electricity and hydraulics were gone. But as designed, a small device known as the ram air turbine dropped into the airstream, spinning from the rushing air, generating just enough power to keep vital systems alive. The pilots looked at their instruments. They were 120 kilometers from Terceira Island, still at 30,000 feet. They would have to glide every meter of that distance. If they failed, the only alternative was a water landing in the Atlantic, an almost certain death sentence for many on board. The cabin was eerily quiet. Children clutched their parents. Crew members instructed passengers to prepare for a possible ditching at sea. The thought of crashing into the freezing ocean, in the dead of night, haunted every soul on board. Captain Piché focused intensely. A commercial jetliner is not built to glide, but his only choice was to fly it like the world's heaviest glider. The descent rate was 2,000 feet per minute. He had 15 minutes to save 306 lives. As the coastline of Terceira emerged faintly on the horizon, one more problem appeared. They were still too high. At 13,000 feet, just 15 kilometers away, they needed to lose altitude fast without overshooting the runway. A steep nosedive risked a crash. Instead, Piché made a bold decision. He banked the aircraft into a full 360-degree turn over the dark Atlantic, bleeding off thousands of feet in one sweeping arc. When the turn was complete, the jet was aligned with the runway but still too high. So he performed a series of S-shaped turns, zigzagging through the sky, trading altitude for distance. Every move was a gamble. Every second mattered. Finally, the runway lights appeared below. Their last chance. Without engines, there would be no go-around, no second attempt. This had to work. The A330 roared down in silence, then slammed onto the tarmac with a violent jolt. 8 of the 12 tires exploded under the impact. Sparks showered into the night as the jet skidded down the runway. For a terrifying moment, it seemed uncontrollable. But slowly, miraculously, it came to a halt. Fire crews rushed in, extinguishing flames that had erupted in the landing gear. Against all odds, every single person on board survived. Air Transat Flight 236 had just performed the longest engine-out glide in the history of commercial aviation, nearly 120 kilometers. Investigators later discovered the cause. Before the flight, maintenance crews in Toronto had installed the wrong part on the right engine. It vibrated loose, rupturing a fuel line. Tens of thousands of liters had streamed into the night sky, unnoticed until it was almost too late. The aftermath changed aviation. Airbus introduced new systems to detect fuel leaks mid-flight, preventing such an error from ever going unnoticed again. As for the men in the cockpit, their extraordinary skill did not go unrecognized. A year later, Captain Robert Piché and First Officer Dirk de Jager were awarded the Superior Airmanship Award for what pilots call a dead-stick landing, bringing a powerless airliner safely back to Earth. That night, what began as a routine flight became a fight against physics, fate, and fear itself. Yet through steady hands, calm judgment, and courage under impossible pressure, 306 lives were delivered back to their families. The story of Flight 236 remains one of the greatest survival tales in modern aviation. Proof that even when the sky turns against you, the human spirit can still find a way to land. Oceanal emphasis. So it feels even more natural when read aloud.